some of these norms, could be harmful. And when they are harmful, it leads to inequality in the society and further widening, the gender gap that exists, in the society. So for me, there are already barriers and gender inequalities that existed over time. And these inequalities, has also been, pronounced, with the impact of climate change. It has exacerbated, all of these inequalities and widened the inequality gap, and now poses, that kind of unique threats, to the livelihood of women and girls, their health and also their safety, in the society. So I think that it's a good place to start the conversation now that all of us are on the same page, with what gender inequality means and what the inequality, also entails. And now we're going to look at the aspect of the gender crisis and how the SRHR, falls into the climate conversation. So we all know about the SDG goals, yeah, and Goal 5, talks about gender equality. So it is safe to say that we can't achieve, gender equality without, prioritizing sexual and reproductive health rights, for women and girls. So it's more like a foundation to achieving, gender equality. So sexual and reproductive health rights, can be divided into two main areas. So we look at sexual reproductive health, which, is defined as a state of, complete physical, mental and social well-being in all matters, relating to reproductive system. So it implies that people are able to have, satisfying and safe, sex life, the capability to reproduce and the freedom, to decide it when and how often, to do so. While the sexual right covers the right to bodily integrity, bodily autonomy, privacy, respect. So we need to uphold these rights to, actually achieve sexual reproductive, health. So going further, so it's a fact, and we all know, that climate change, does not affect all genders in the same way. So it disproportionately affects women and girls. And it has to do with some of these factors, such as gender norms, societal structures, like all these structural barriers, cultural barriers, law and discrimination as well. So women and girls are among the hardest hit by climate emergency in any circumstance. Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, please, where did do you lose me? So I know if I could just go back a bit. Yeah, okay. So I'll just continue from where I stopped. So I was talking about the direct and the indirect impacts of climate crisis on sexual and reproductive health rights. So we could see that manifest, when there are economic challenges, in the society, in communities, more especially, maybe for an instance, where there is low crop yield. So you see community members actually struggling with how to sustain their life, their families, on a daily basis. And that could result to further exacerbating the crisis, that you see in child marriages. So because most parents can't afford, a 3 square meal or even a meal a day, so they want to reduce the lesser amount that they feed in the family. So you see them giving out their girl child, out in marriage, and just to collect the bride price, which further more like asking the girl to make a sacrifice for the family by, giving her out in marriage and all that. So we see, climate, we see child marriages, happen. And this kind of situation can also lead to some harmful cultural practices, such as FGM. So before the girl is given out in marriage, that process might have to take place first, and you see all those happening to the girl child. So staying also on economic hardship, you will see, issues around what most people or most climate experts would term as, commercialization of women and girls. Like in most cases, giving out the women some of their girls, using them like to get money or to borrow money, or those kind of all those kind of transactions that happen. So another instance that we should also look at, increased risk of violence, when there is conflict, in a society, or for instance, when there is flooding and communities are moved into internal displaced camp. So it's also a recipe for, in most cases, a recipe for sexual and gender-based violence. And we could also see it leading to, transactional sex, because we've seen reports that show that, there are people in the IDP camps, and there is this kind of transactional sex that happens for food. For them to have, food, they will have to do that in exchange for sex. So these kind of things, this kind of climate-induced crisis could actually push young girls into the IDP camp, and they face this kind of issues that impacts on their sexual, reproductive, and health rights. So clean water and sanitation is also something that we should also look at, and that also deals with, menstrual hygiene, in schools, that could actually also lead to young girls, dropping out of schools. So I've talked about food shortages, hunger, and malnutrition. It's also a direct impact, on women and girls. Climate shock is also another area to also look at, like when flooding happens, when disasters happen, when erosions and villages are washed away, frontline communities are affected, droughts, villages are overtaken by, desert encroachment and all that. So all those shocks also impact on the sexual, reproductive health and rights of young girls. So we look at health problems. What are the impacts? Is the spread of diseases as a result of, all this climate crisis, like, when communities are washed away, floods, when even young girls, become so vulnerable, and it's very difficult for them to also access, healthcare facilities. So we could also look at, climate crisis, being responsible for some of these issues. So on the last lap of this keynote presentation, I'll be looking at, how we are responding to these issues. So a few days back, UNFPA report on SRHR, highlighted the fact that only few countries, captured sexual and reproductive health rights, in their climate plan. That's the NDC. So perhaps, countries are more interested in budgeting for clean energy systems and innovations and the rest of them. But how about, looking into good health? How about budgeting safeguards for human rights, for women and girls, and that is where the sexual and reproductive health right approach comes in. So it is in fact an adaptation, risk reduction and resilience, approach. And that is why I strongly believe that just education is one of the most powerful strategies to combat climate change. Because I believe that for every girl child you train, for every woman you train, you improve your country's resilience, to climate disaster. Yeah. Finally, on this, I would like to make this statement, more like words on the marble. Climate change is inherently a justice issue. And we cannot achieve climate justice without climate gender justice. So I'll end it there. I have a few recommendations that I want to make for this kind of conversation. And for some of us who will be at the COP28, we should also advocate that women, can't have, we as activists, as gender activists, climate activists, we can't have this conversation and solutions without women and girls. Yeah, they should own the space. Like we should allow them to breathe. If we're using it in a Nigerian context, we should allow them to breathe. We should give them that space. They should chart this conversation. They should lead this conversation, and they should be seen as change agents and not as a vulnerable group. So empowering women and girls also, as regards to sexual and reproductive health rights, abolishing harmful cultural practices that are currently amplifying, climate crisis, particularly as it regards to sexual and reproductive health rights. Looking at also other recommendations, fostering women and girls' climate leadership and pro-environmental decision making. We should also put all these things on the front burner and developing women and girls' green skills for green jobs. So on this note, I would like to say a very big thank you to the organizers for giving me this opportunity and this platform to ventilate my ideas around sexual and reproductive health rights.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
And the intersection, between climate change. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but it seems like the speaker just went mum.
Because it's not yet 3:30, I think this is also session 40. So let's wait for them to be done before we also start ours.
Yeah, so I'm done with the presentation. Maybe the panelists can now take it off from here.
All right. Thank you so much, Austin, for this wonderful presentation. So my name is Emerin, and I'm originally supposed to moderate session 15, but I would like us to continue with the discussion on gender inequalities and climate crisis. So I have with me the panelists. If you are here, could you please introduce yourself one after the other so that we can go ahead and discuss this pertinent issue?
Hello,
Panelists,
everyone.
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Please
Can
go
you
ahead
hear
and
me?
introduce. Yes, we can. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Pius, and I'm from Nigeria. I'm the founder of She Can Up, an initiative that is geared towards eradicating girl child marriage in Nigeria and Africa at large. Listening to the keynote speaker just gave me a lot of goosebumps because I can relate to everything he has said, because this is a field I am passionate about, and I've been working with a lot of youth and teenagers, and especially single mothers across Nigeria for a period of 3 years now. So I am so excited to be part of this panelist, to learn from others and also share from my experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. Do we have any other panelists available? So, Mary, yes. So now I want to try to discuss certain issues with you. So could you directly or specifically let us know how specific ways in which climate change impacts sexual and reproductive health rights, particularly for women in marginalized communities?
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Because
Yes,
my camera is not on. All right. So I'll start by saying or sharing a story with everyone. You know, growing up in northern Nigeria, I witnessed how climate crisis affects the well-being of women and girls, right? Causing them to travel long distance to obtain daily supplies and thereby exposing them to greater danger. And just like what the keynote speaker said, you know, climate crisis do not affect both genders equally. Do we agree? Okay, so climate crisis affects the sexual and reproductive health of teenage girls most times, who most times as a result of migrating from one place to another, they use leaves and rags and papers during their menstrual period, thereby exposing their bodies to dangers. Because, you know, I'll cite an example. Northerners traveling from the far north, let's say Maiduguri, Bauchi, that's from Nigeria, down to places like Middle Belt, which is Benue State, Kogi, and the rest of them, happen to encounter such difficulty on their way to find a greener pasture as a result of drought, erosion, deforestation, and all manner of climate issues. Now, these girls are exposed, they are young adults, the women are exposed to greater danger because when you look at their menstrual flow, before they get to a place where they can get proper sanitaries, it's almost impossible. So what they do, they resort to using leaves, rag, and all manner. So endangering their lives, first their health. Then we look at cases like rape. These girls have to trek. Most times they have to sleep on the street, in the bush. I mean, areas that are not dignified, right? And they are mostly exposed to harm. So climate change affects sexual and reproductive health, I must say.
Great. Thank you very much, Mary. Indeed, women are always vulnerable when it comes to certain harsh conditions. And with what you just said right now, demonstrating the reproductive health and all the impacts of climate change, is there a way that we can ensure that services could be gender responsive? Like if we are talking about making sexual reproductive issues more public oriented and not private, which is typical in typical in African cultures. It's even more from where I come from, it's even a taboo to even mention a sex organ, although it's just part of the human body. Is there a way we can ensure that services are more gender responsive?
Okay, yes, I'll answer that question by saying a very big yes. Now, it's high time we stop the narrative or being ashamed of mentioning um, reproductive organs like, oh, this is a penis, this is a vagina. You call it the way it is because we need to teach these people this is what it is. And you need to educate them. This is where education comes in. I will still refer to the keynote speaker. He made mention of a lot of things that I was really, really impressed with, right? In his recommendation, women and girls are to be allowed to breathe. Like, let us breathe. For God's sake, cut us some slack. Women and girls should be, and they should not be seen as vulnerable groups, but as change agents. This can only come as a result of advocacy, as part of education, call for informative town hall meetings for crying out loud. These people need to understand that women, girls, and the little children, I will have to add them, are suffering, right? We need to we need to visit our policies and law, reforms of policies and law, government initiative and intervention programs need to come in, capacity building seminars. The adults need to understand and learn these things so that they can pass it to the younger guys, okay? So for me, I would also say, when the keynote speaker was speaking, he made mention of how poverty, lack and want push these people into forcing their children to illegal child marriage and child marriage. Yeah. So we need to create jobs for parents. And realistically speaking, this is one thing we suffer in northern Nigeria, where you have to push your girl child into early marriage because, hey, there is no other means of survival. So these girls have their own lives wasted. When they get to a certain point, they build new generation from that knowledge that they have, right? But if things are done for their parents, which is job creation for parents, I strongly believe that the children will be given a better future. Young girls have their lives and also make decisions as regards their sexual and reproductive health, right? Not to be forced to do things they are not supposed to do because of circumstances. Now, what I do as Shikan of is visit internally displaced camps, rural communities, impoverished cities, ensure that these girls are educated properly on their bodies, how to make their emergency sanitary pads, which is something I teach, right, for free, without taking a dime from them, because I know that, I mean, a simple heart of kindness creates an endless ripple. They learn from the kind of kindness you offer to them. So I strongly believe that creating job opportunities for these girls, which is green skills for green jobs, which is some of the things I also do. They're having with other organizations to empower young girls and teenagers so that they can be able to be self-sufficient even without the help of any government bodies. It all depends on us to start. Like we all say, change begins with me. So I have to start, even if nobody is watching. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. I see how passionate you really are. Like you've given us in-depth knowledge. I mean, all the questions that I wanted to ask, you actually did answer it in all your submissions. And I see the zeal and a passion for it. Could you just use about 10 seconds to tell us what SheHub does? Because it was really, really quite insightful. I see how knowledgeable and how passionate you are. Could you just use about 5 seconds to just tell us about, because I see that you are the founder for SheHub Nigeria. Could you just give us like 5 seconds of what you actually do very briefly?
Okay, so it's Shikan stands for the girl child strength. She's not just a girl, she's not just a female, she's a human being before gender separated her. So she needs to be given that opportunity to explore, to be herself. So it's Shikan of. So as Shikan of, we inspire, we train, and also we advocate for girl child rights, right? And we also ensure that we give the girls around our community a good foundation out of the one they've known. So basically, we advocate, inspire, and train the girl child for a better future.
Thank you so much, Mary. If you have just joined us, this is the West Africa Sustainability Week, and the main organizers for this virtual session is the MAI Foundation Global. And just before we concluded on the session on gender and climate, we had a wonderful presentation who gave us a very educative session, and we are also joined by Mary Pius, who is the founder of Shikan Hub Nigeria, and she has actually delved into how climate impacts the female reproductive health, and the way how we can ensure that gender services are gender responsive. We have also been able to hear from the inputs of Mary that we can make sexual reproductive issues more public oriented and not private, which is quite typical in African cultures, particularly the West African, but I'm pretty sure my brothers in the East, North, and Southern could also attest to this fact that it's more a public oriented industry. So thank you so much, Mary and Austin. I really enjoyed my session with you, and we look forward to I hope that next year the foundation will be able to host physical week celebrations so that we could interact and have more time to engage face to face. Very well. So in the next